Well, I think in general, it's quite clear that the constellation of forces is changing, and the kind of dynamics of power is moving away from Europe, mostly towards Asia. And I think it's likely that the next 10 years will be very much dominated by the rivalry between China, which is going up, and the US, that will try to keep its position as the strongest power in the world. And Europe is somehow between these two poles, and in a very basically uncomfortable position. I think Europe will not be a top player in terms of projecting military force. It will also not be quick enough and nimble enough to dominate the diplomatic processes. But it has big strengths. It's the biggest trading power in the world. It's the biggest source of development assistance, the biggest source of humanitarian assistance. And because of its big market, it is one of the big exporters of rules and regulations worldwide. And these assets have to be used in a clever way to maintain Europe's still rather positive position in the world. I think it's still one of the best places to live, I would think. We even though, of course, we are in a way managing a decline, because it's quite natural that other continents are catching up and pulling ahead, but Europe's position can still be quite strong if we manage these challenges in the right way. Well, I would think the main comparative advantage of this conference is that it is conceived as a dialogue with the citizens. As you know, much of the European Union was always a bit of a top-down approach, basically. It was conceived by elites, and it was driven by the governments and by the Commission, and there was not really a place for the citizens. And I think the idea of this conference is that it should start a very strong dialogue and well-functioning dialogue with the citizens. The idea is the citizens' panels will be put together, but there will be also participation of the citizens in the plenaries of the conference, and there will be a new type of online platform that would allow an exchange of views and positions open to the public. And I think this is the main value added of the conference, that it might allow citizens to understand better what European politics is about, and also to influence it, because the input is supposed to lead then to a report to the various institutions that will decide on follow-up action. I don't think that the conference itself will be the place where big reforms can be negotiated, or big new strategic conceptions for the European foreign policy. I think this will be done by the institutions that are entitled to do so. But the dialogue with the citizens, the kind of feedback with the public, I think is the main point of the conference. Well, in that regard, so far, this is not a success story, because I think personally it was a very good idea that the EU started a collective procurement process rather than leaving it to the individual member states. But it also had as a consequence that the vaccination rollout was not as fast as it was in the US or in the UK or in Israel. And there's a lot of disappointment at the moment in the EU. And there are some countries like Hungary, for instance, that are turning to Russia, and others are turning to China, because they are very dissatisfied with the European process. Europe has been relatively open in exporting vaccines, much more so than the US or the UK, but it has not done so in a strategic way. And I think going forward, the big challenge will be clearly to turn this vaccination exporting to the development world into a huge and successful project. COVAX, I think, is a good platform to do that, but the EU has to engage much more. And I think in a few months we'll have many more vaccines than we need, and then we really have to be very generous and very proactive in making sure that the global south also benefits from it, because it's quite clear that unless the pandemic is defeated everywhere, it will not be defeated in Europe. That is quite clear, because new mutations will come again and again, and our position will remain very fragile unless the whole world benefits from the vaccination. Well, I think it was simply a reflection of the fact that we didn't have enough vaccines ourselves. An authoritarian regime like Russia or China, Russia doesn't use much of this Sputnik vaccine internally. It mainly exports it and uses this as a geopolitical tool. You can't do this in a democratic environment, because people will get incredibly mad. Just imagine that Europeans do not get vaccinated because we decide for geopolitical reasons to export our BioNTech vaccines to Turkey. There will be a revolution. So this kind of game playing, geopolitical game playing, is possible for authoritarian regimes like China or Russia. It's not a possibility for Europe. I think Europe's moment will come when we have enough vaccines ourselves, and then I hope we'll be very generous also in terms of making the export very cheap and affordable for poorer countries. I think that would be very good, particularly when the conference discusses neighborhood policies or the global role of the European Union. It might make sense to include also citizens from this region in such a discussion. And I think in terms of the internet-based platform, I think that will be accessible also for people outside the EU who can participate in this discussion in this format. But I would be all in favor.